right? Okay, well, I'm going to go first, and I hope the continuity makes sense. Thanks so much for coming early on a Saturday morning. I'm really happy to be here. I want to thank Tamar for inviting me. I love talking to this audience. I love talking to people who live with type 1 diabetes, people who have type 1 diabetes, parents of kids with type 1, because I really think that is the audience that understands what we're trying to do best of all. And so I try to reach out to this community as much as possible. What I'm going to talk about, somewhere I have a little timer. Somebody's supposed to have a little timer. I'm going to try and speak fast and cover a lot of material, but I want to really emphasize the work we've done this past year. We've published a lot of work in our inpatient studies over about 4.5 years after we finished our pig studies. And then we got into the outpatient setting using an iPhone system. And that was about 2 years ago, almost to the day. It was in February, March of 2013 when we began our outpatient studies. We published work from that in a New England Journal of Medicine paper in the middle of last year, an adult study we did in 2013, and our first summer camp study in 2013 in adolescents. And what we haven't yet published is all the work we did in 2014 and into the beginning of this year. And so that's what I want to talk about today. I don't usually use this interface, but anyway. I am Damiano in the middle there. And I do want to just make one comment about this slide. With one exception, everybody on this slide is a kid with type 1 diabetes who's also worn our Bionic Pancreas and been in one of our 2 summer camp studies, the pre-adolescent study, which happened last summer, or the adolescent study, which happened the year before that. Can you guess who's not one of those people? Top guy, up in the middle, little one, with the blue eyes, the black dog shirt. That's David, so he's my son. David was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes by my wife when he was 11 months old, so he's almost 16 now, so he's had type 1 for almost 15 years. He's not been in one of my camp studies, he's not allowed, but he's really what got me working on this problem. I had a PhD student by the name of Bionic around that time when David was diagnosed, who was working on other problems in the lab, and I got his interest in working on mathematical algorithms to control glucose in type 1 diabetes. And we started working on building those mathematical algorithms and testing in pigs back in 2002-2003. We got into the pig model in 2005. And into human subjects with my collaborator Stephen Russell at MGH in 2008. And as of 2012, we had built this platform, which is basically, this doesn't really work very well. It scrolls over and everything. I should have just used my laptop. But we built this platform that you see here in 2012. It really consists of 3 components. It's an iPhone which runs mathematical algorithms which make automatic therapeutic decisions about how much insulin and glucagon to deliver through infusion sets. It's got a continuous glucose monitor which uses the Dexcom G4 platform. And it's got 2 insulin pumps made by Tandem, the T-Slim pumps. One is filled with insulin and the other is repurposed to deliver glucagon. And what you see basically is a connectivity between this really is one brick that you see here. There's a custom hardware interface in the bottom piece that says Boston University, and it connects the iPhone on one side of the device to the G4 receiver on the other. And then the wireless Bluetooth radio on the phone talks to 2 Bluetooth radios on the Tandem T-Slim pumps at the bottom here. So basically, if you look at this creepy dude here, this little man, this is kind of the way it would look if you would wear this thing. He's got the little brick in his pocket, he's got 2 T-Slim pumps in pouches or something, and a transmitter that talks to the phone. And so you can see this is sort of a closed loop system as we describe it, where glucose data feeds into the phone, into the receiver, the continuous glucose monitor receiver unit, which then streams data through hardwire connection into the phone. We've got an app that we built of our own design that has its own user interface, and it's got all the mathematical algorithms built into it that make those decisions, that control the Bluetooth radio to dose either the insulin or the glucagon pump every 5 minutes. And then we just use standard FDA-approved infusion sets to deliver the insulin and glucagon. We get very small amounts of glucagon compared to a rescue dose, so it's not like giving these giant doses. We're giving doses that on an average at each step might be on the order of 1 to 3% of a rescue dose. And over the course of the day, we give about a half of a rescue dose spread out over a whole day. So it's typically delivered on average in our adult subjects. So this is a timeline that I put up roughly almost 3 years ago. I laid this timeline out. And with one exception, we've stayed on track with this timeline, and that is the multi-center study was initially a single-site study, which was to finish in 2014. But we were able to get $3 million from the NIH to extend that to a 4-site multi-center study. So we quadrupled the size of the study, and we will be finished with that study in a month from now. So it added about 3.5 months to the whole story, but ultimately we got a lot more data out of it, so it was certainly worth the extra time. So this is the timeline that we laid out back. This is at a Children's Diabetes Conference, actually, in 2012. And it shows our first outpatient study with that device I just described. It was done in downtown Boston. It was an outpatient study, but it was really our first foray out of the outpatient setting. So we really hadn't, tested it in any other way other than in the hospital on a laptop computer. So that study was really just focused on the subjects living in downtown Boston for 5 days and 5 nights. But what was really special about it was the first study ever done in the outpatient setting where we had 24/7 glucose control. So it was fully automated glucose glycemic control. Subjects lived in a hotel, but they were out and about doing their thing. And they did have one-on-one nursing. We had a control arm, but those subjects didn't live in the same circumstances as they did under the on Bionic Pancreas. They lived at home for 5 days. And when they were on the Bionic Pancreas, they were, eating at restaurants. They were just being crazy. They were being much more. It was like on vacation. So it was Bionic Pancreas and steroids kind of thing. They had a great time. It was a good study because we learned a lot from those data, but there wasn't perfect parallelism in the way that study was designed. We didn't intend to. We were just field testing the device for the first time. So all of our subsequent studies have had, we've maintained perfect parity between the experimental group on the Bionic Pancreas and the control group on their own care, so that we really know what the Bionic Pancreas is doing relative to that under the same circumstances and the same protocol conditions. And that's what we did in the CAMP study of 2013 in teenagers, and again a year later in the same venue in a CAMP study that we did in preteens, 6 to 11 years old. Those studies involved kids living 5 days and 5 nights in a diabetes camp on the device, but it was none of these are nighttime studies, nighttime only studies. These were 24/7, 5-day studies. Turn the device on, type in the subject's weight, and it just controlled their blood sugar for 5 straight days. So it really was a very, fully automated system. And those studies, I will show you the results of the 2014 study in the pre-adolescent today, as well as the multi-center study, which we started in the middle of last year. In May or June, we had the kickoff of the Bionic Pancreas multi-center study, in which subjects wore the device for 11 straight days. But this was really different from the Beacon Hill, because they weren't living in a hotel in downtown Boston. They were just living at home. And we had 5 clinical sites that where we enrolled subjects. Massachusetts General Hospital had 10 subjects. University of Massachusetts Medical Center had 10 subjects. And Stanford, which just finished early last month, had 10 subjects. And then finally, we're starting UNC Chapel Hill in 48 hours. So the day after tomorrow, we kick off our last 10 subjects, the multi-center study at Chapel Hill. That study will be over in a month from now, so it's about April 27th. Right after we get our taxes in, that study's done. So we were really pleased to be able to keep, sort of plodding along at this plan that we laid out early on. We've been able to meet our milestones and our goals for these studies. I should mention that in these studies, I'm going to focus on the multi-center study. That involved adults 18 and older. The multi-center study, there were no restrictions placed on exercise or activity. Our device uses 2 hormones, so it tries to be as biomimetic as possible. It really tries to emulate what the pancreas does. It uses insulin to lower blood sugar, and glucagon to raise it. They counter one another. And glucagon is actually the first line of defense against hypoglycemia in people who don't have type 1 diabetes. So, in deference to millions of years of evolution, we too think our Bionic Pancreas should, in fact, use that kind of functionality as well. And we've had really good success with it. And it's just very critical around threatened hypoglycemia that accompanies exercise, postprandial period with the insulin having a long tail. These injected insulins are still pretty slow relative to what the pancreas can do. So that threatens hypoglycemia even with the Bionic Pancreas. So glucagon really helps stave that off or eliminate it almost completely. But what I want to show you before I get into the high-level summary results of this is I'd like to show you basically what one sample subject looks like in the multi-center study. what this device is able to do. And do you have a pointer here by any chance? No, I guess not. What is this? It's just a real pen. So, Bruce does. You bet. Thanks, buddy. And I don't know where to be on this guy. All right. So this is data from one subject in the multi-center study. And I just want to point out a couple things. This is the average glucose. Each one of these points here. The average glucose level this person achieved on their own insulin pump for 11 days living at home. So these subjects could go to work, they drove back and forth, they could work and home, they were driving on the Bionic Pancreas, they were taking public transportation, there was no nurse looking over their shoulder. We put the Bionic Pancreas on Monday evening, typed in their weight, hit start, doesn't know anything about this person but other than what they weigh. And it doesn't know about their basal rates, doesn't know about their carb-to-insulin ratios or correction factors, it doesn't know anything about them but their weight. And that's an extremely important point. And that's true of every subject we've ever put it on. Adolescents, adults, preteens, the device doesn't care. But it adapts continuously, automatically, every 5 minutes. It basically makes a decision every 5 minutes. 288 decisions a day that you don't have to make anymore. And it does this all the while looking at how much insulin it's dosing and what your average glycemia is, and it's adjusting the aggressiveness of the system and ultimately converging on what your insulin needs are for the current moment. It's always constantly marching along and adapting to what you are and how you change over time. So that's pretty important because we can put this on people who have onset diabetes, we suspect that's a study we want to do in the near future, and we can put it on adults, adolescents, teenagers, all the while. And it'll also handle intercurrent illness. And that's extremely important, as we all know. When you have type 1 diabetes, you suddenly get an upper respiratory virus, you become very insulin resistant. You have to take steroid therapy, perhaps, in some circumstances. You can become insulin resistant, you need more insulin device. We'll see that over the course of about a day or so. It'll upgrade the insulin dose you need to the levels that are necessary to keep in good glycemic control. And similarly, if you're like a vomiting illness, you suddenly become very insulin sensitive for a few days. The device will back off immediately and it will adapt down to lower insulin dosing to keep you safe. So it has this ability to adapt to very different populations automatically, but also to the ever-changing you. And that's really what it has to do, a device that accommodates you and not the other way around. Everything we've ever known in type 1 diabetes is a life where we have to accommodate the devices that control our blood sugars or the technologies we happen to use. Multiple daily injection pumps, this is very different. But anyway, just to show you these data here, this subject has an average glucose level. You can see each one of these little points here is an average glucose of 210 mg/dL for day 1, 148 day 2, 174 day 3, and so on. Total average glucose over all 11 days was 202 mg/dL. And they didn't have any hypoglycemia, but no glucose level below 60, for example, during the day. But they did at night. So these little marks here indicate the average over the nighttime period between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. And so you can see here they had a lot of hypoglycemia at night, 351, 210, 321, 248, 281. The one night that actually was under this red line, which is the American Diabetes Association goal for therapy of 154 mg/dL. They had hypoglycemia. It's this circle here tells you how much hypo they had. And here she was below 60 mg/dL at night when she was unconscious for more than 5% of the time. So the one night she did really well in terms of mean glycemia, she paid a price by being hypoglycemic for over 5% of the time. Now, we're there to call them up under usual care if they go below 50 for more than 15 minutes. So there's a bit of a study artifact there because that's by protocol we have to do that in both arms. But of course in usual care we do that much more often than in the Bionic Pancreas. And the fact of the matter is she could have had a much more serious low if we didn't intervene. I just would emphasize that this is something that we're all worried about, right? This hypoglycemia at night, and we're not able to do something about it. But if you want to look at what happens with this subject, now watch what happens when she wears the Bionic Pancreas for 11 days. Remember, the red line is the American Diabetes Association goal for therapy. And look how much variability also there is from day to day, from night to night. This is what happens to her on the Bionic Pancreas. And all it knew about this subject was her weight, right? And it came online and quickly figured her out. And that's day 1, right? It did really well on day 1. In the adolescents, day 1 would be more like 160, 165 mg/dL, but on all the other days it would be under their goal for therapy. So we're looking at an average that dropped from 200 mg per deciliter to 142. I show this person because she's actually quite typical of people with type 1 diabetes. Her A1C is in the mid-8s, maybe a little bit higher than the national average, but not that much more higher. And that's what an 8.5 A1C would look like, that previous slide. This would be an A1C, on the other hand, of about 6.5, 6.6%. Right? And she has basically 0 time below 60 mg per deciliter. And she didn't have to make a single decision for 11 days. So think about her diabetes. Right? Let's talk about that. So, the results of the Beacon Hill study and the first summer camp studies I mentioned, I'm not going to go into detail. We've published those results. We've spoken about them publicly quite a bit. Because I really wanted to give some time to the 2014 studies. We've shown some of these results, but we keep, having, new results that I like to append to this. And let's just start with the summer camp study. This is one of our subjects in last summer's study. We can believe it. She was 47 pounds. She was our smallest subject. She used about 11 units of insulin a day. And the device, we typed in its weight and it figured that out. And our largest subject was almost 300 pounds. He used 150 units of insulin a day. So the very same device, initialized only with weight, managed a more than 10-fold variation in the amount of total daily dose insulin and almost a 10-fold difference of weight. So maybe 8-fold difference of weight. So I mean, it's really very robust in its ability to handle a large range of body habitus, of people with type 1. We haven't tested it in type 2. But ultimately, we're very pleased with the way it can adapt to these large variations from subject to subject, but also maintain a small variability in intra-subject variability. You don't see the glucose levels change much, as you saw from that previous slide. So this is the summer camp study we did in 2014 in the preteens. These were kids 6 to 11 years old, wore the Bionic Pancreas for 5 days and 5 nights in the summer camp setting in central Massachusetts. This was not a nighttime only study. This is a 24/7 study. Device initialized with the subject's weight. 19 kids wore the device 5 days, and then those same 19 kids were on their own pumps for 5 days in the same exact setting with the same rules applied. Hypoglycemia, same meals, same activities. They slept in the cabins along with the other kids. We didn't separate the cohort out. And what you see here is the average glucose level of the control group, of the kids on their own pump, over the 5-day period here. Each one of these, the endpoints of each of these lines is the mean glucose over the whole study period for each kid, each of the 19 kids. And on the right, you can see what the average was for each of those kids on the Bionic Pancreas. The dashed line here is the ADA goal for therapy for preteens, which would be an A1C of 7.5%. So the entire cohort comes in on the goal for therapy with an average of 137 mg per deciliter of summer camp setting, only 1.2% of the time below 60 mg per deciliter, only 17% of the time above 180. And these kids, again, they're not thinking about their diabetes on this thing, right? They're just playing the kids. They're carrying a lot of stuff. This thing is not elegant by any means, right? There's an iPhone and a Dexcom and 2 t:slim pumps and 1 CGM and 2 infusion sets. But they're having a lot more fun over here than they are. I'll just tell you that now. And you see all the circles here? The circles tell you how much time they spend below 60 compared to these circles here. And so you can see that there's much less hypo over here. But I should mention that this is actually less hypo than these kids are likely to be getting on their own. Their average glucose on their pump was 7.5%, and that wasn't actually too far off from their baseline A1C. These kids were really good, under pretty good control. Their average A1C is 7.6%. And but they still spend 2.8% of the time below 60, and that's with us watching them 24/7 and going out in the field to check their blood sugar and give them juice if they're under 60 mg per deciliter for 15 minutes. As parents, we can't promise that for our kids. Imagine tell your kid that you're never going to be below 60 for more than 15 minutes without me coming over there and giving you juice. And that produced 2.8% time below 60. Check out what the Bionic Pancreas was able to do. Now, it benefited also from those visits, but there were many fewer of them. And whenever they are coming in below 60 mg per deciliter, the device is proactively treating that. They're getting glucagon and the insulin's been turned off potentially for hours. So the difference here is huge when you take into account that this is actually way better than the standard of care to achieve. And so too are the mean glycemia results that we're seeing, an average of 168. But I want to make one other point. Look at how much inter-subject variability there is here. It's 168 was the average on their own pump, plus or minus 30. Look at the variability over here. The standard deviation is only 11. It's 3 times the intersubject variability we see in bionic pancreas. Look at how tightly packed they are. Well, the same is true of the multi-center study using the exact same device to initialize the only way in adults. So this is the multi-center study which I described a moment ago. 29 adults have completed, 10 more to go. 18 and older, 11 days living at home. And here are the summary results of those first 29 subjects. Again, here's the ADA goal for therapy of an average glucose level of 154, which means A1C of 7%. And a little bit too fast. Somehow it skipped the averages, which you certainly want to see. Here we go. There. So the average was 142 mg per deciliter plus or minus 9. Notice threefold increase in standard deviation relative to the control with the bionic pancreas. This group had an average of baseline A1C of about 7.8%. So you can see there's a study effect here. They're doing better on their own pump than they do in reality. But still, it's really good control. We're getting 6.6 is what we would project this device would get if you wore it day in, day out, 3 months. With time below 60, only 0.6% of the time. Less than 1% of the time on this device. Time above 180, only 20% of the time. This one subject, in fact, that you see here, that came down from way up here down to here, right? This one subject actually ran her target glucose 30 mg per deciliter higher than our default. Just about everybody else kept it most of the time at the default value. This subject ran at about 30 mg per deciliter higher than all the other subjects did by choice. We allowed them to adjust the set point. Most subjects just left it at the default. But this subject ran at 30 mg per deciliter higher, and still her average would come in with an A1C of about 7.4%. So if you're aware of the device for a little while, she might actually decide to lower it further up to her. But we do give this option. And I should just mention that these are the same results, but I'm putting over this on the side here. Total daily dose of insulin on their own pump in the summer camp was 0.68 units per kilo per day. And on the bionic pancreas, in the exact same circumstances, it was that's a 6.8. It's very difficult. There's no statistically significant difference between the amount of insulin they used at camp. And by the way, we do lower their basal rates by about 30% when they walk into camp. So it didn't need to know that. It just was what we figured out. So it got a much better result, as you can see, with the same amount of insulin, which means that the device is not using more insulin than usual care. It's just distributing it much more economically, much more effectively, much more optimally to get much lower means and much less hypoglycemia. And look at the adults over here in the multi-center, 0.69 units per kilo per day. We don't have the full cohort in yet. We're still downloading the pump data. This is literally coming hot off the press. But 0.68 on the bionic pancreas based on all 29 subjects. So you can see, again, they're coming in about the same, and there's also no difference between the adults and the peds here. In the adolescent group in summer camp a year earlier, again, there was no statistically significant difference between the amount of insulin they used on their own pump at camp and on the bionic pancreas. It was, I think, 0.79 on their own pump and 0.82 on the bionic pancreas, and there was no statistically significant difference there. So the device is using the same amount of insulin that they use in these environments, but it's just distributing it much more optimally to get a much better result. And just to show you how much glucagon they use, this is 0.36 milligrams per day in the preteens, which is about a third of a rescue dose a day. And the adults are using about half of the rescue dose, 0.52 milligrams per day. And this tells you, but these guys are tiny, right? They're little guys, so you have to figure out what their consumption is per unit mass. And they are very physical. They can't run around a lot. So they used about 11 micrograms per kilo per day, as opposed to adults who use about 7. Based on our estimates of what the peripheral glucagon levels would need to be injected to keep normal liver glucagon levels in the hepatic circulation, we think this is about three times higher than normal glucagon levels in people without type 1. Whenever you give a drug peripherally, there's inefficiencies there because you're not giving it right into the portal vein. So there's higher levels of glucagon that we're giving, but not by a factor of 10, by a factor of 2 or 3 is what we expect. Okay, I'm losing time here. Oh, wow, I'm really losing time. Okay, so I think that was great. 5 minutes left. Ultimately, I wanted to give you, I thought I had a timeline. I did show you my timeline. Let's just talk about that a little bit longer. Where we are right now, as I mentioned, is we're about to kick off in 48 hours. We're going to kick off the last leg, the last 10 subjects of our multi-center study at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And that study will finish the multi-center, that cohort will finish 40 subjects. And we're in the business of writing up the paper for this pediatric study that we finished last summer. That's pretty much finished, and then we're going to have to work with all of the 4 teams at the 4 sites to put together the results of this and get this out there. But I'm hoping to get these things published all in the next few months, or submitted at least in several months. And we have some studies planned for the second half of this year. What we plan to be doing is one last round of studies using the iPhone system, and that is what we call a set point study. We're going to look at this device at different targets. I think I told you that subjects could set the targets at different levels, although we found that in almost all subjects to date in the multi-center study, they sort of ignored that option. But there can be many reasons why you might want to adjust the target for yourself. You might want to adjust it to be more aggressive in pregnancy, for example. You might want to adjust it to be a little bit more conservative for young kids with type 1. Nervous parents might want to run things off a little bit. Or bringing somebody in from a very high blood sugar off of standard care therapy onto the Bionic Pancreas, you might want to step them down. Start them at a high blood sugar. There's really important medical reasons for wanting to do this. Start them at an average glucose that might come in with an A1C about 7.5 and then work their way down to a level that meets goal for therapy. Because you have to worry about people with retinopathy in particular. You don't want to bring them down too quickly, too much, too fast, too much, too fast. So there's reasons to do this. And for different kinds of activities, you might want to raise it temporarily. So we have this capability. So we do a set point study that allows us to test each person in the same cohort. Each person will test the device at different targets, all the way up to 30 mg per deciliter higher than our current default values. So we'll run them each for about a week at these different targets. And we'll also look at a couple of those higher targets with no glucagon, just insulin only. The FDA certainly wants us to look at that too, to understand the value proposition of adding glucagon to bring everybody in under that goal for therapy. That second hormone becomes more and more important. So that's going to be the second half of this year. And finally, we move into next year. And as I've mentioned before, we're working with our industrial collaborators to build a fully integrated dual chamber system to get rid of this giant contraption our kids are carrying around with them, and our adults are carrying around with them. We want to build a system that's a dual chamber pump built in, all integrated, with the continuous glucose monitor integrated, all of our mathematical algorithms integrated in the device. And then it would just have it'll be a tube pump that connects to the 2 infusion sets. And this system will be totally portable. It'll be a single unit. It won't rely on a smartphone in any way. As an option, it will talk to a smartphone if you want to share your data with a cloud service so that your family members and loved ones can see your glucose levels. But it will not be a requirement of the device. It does not require cell phone connectivity or cellular tower connectivity. So those studies we want to, with testing that fully integrated system, we want to see begin in 2016 and finish in 2017. And so, we're still on track to try and get this thing done before David goes off to college, which is really soon. It's unbelievable. My daughter's going to college in a few months, and then he's 2 years behind her. So we are working as fast as we can to meet that deadline. And the only way we can possibly come close to achieving it is with the help of all these wonderful people. So this is my team at BU, the engineering team up here. At MGH, my clinical collaborator, Stephen Russell, and all of our all the clinical support staff that work with him at MGH. I want to thank the Clara Barton Center to help us put in all these summer camp studies. They were critical in the execution of both of those summer camp studies. At the University of Massachusetts, we have Dave Harlan, who is critical in helping us to execute a UMass side of the multi-center study. And Bruce Buckingham here at Stanford was the PI who led the Stanford cohort. John Buse is the PI at Chapel Hill that we've been working with this past couple of weeks to get his team ready. And finally, all of our industrial collaborators here that have made all these outpatient studies I've been talking about possible at Dexcom and Tandem Diabetes Care primarily are the ones that really brought this iPhone system to the fore. And all of our support is coming from a variety of places, most notably the NIH and the Helmsley Trust, but also money from foundations like the Banting Foundations and Family Foundations, the JDRF, and down at the bottom here is the Wallace H. Coulter Foundation, and lots of private giving. I'm happy to report that we did a Go Bionic Challenge in July at the Children's Diabetes Conference. And in the 6 months after that period, the second half of 2014, we raised $1.2 million in gifts that came in over the 6-month period. I just want to thank all of you folks out there. And here's our website, This website is bionicpancreas.org or artificialpancreas.org. So have a look at that. Thanks for your attention, folks. I appreciate your time.